Hello all, welcome to a video on Git Basics. In this video, we are going to see what are the initial steps we need to perform to work with Git. And later, we are going to see how to create repositories locally and updating them with code or files, and how to track the changes happened on those files and optionally uploading them to the GitHub. And later we are going to see how to create repositories in GitHub and how to cloning them into the local machine and how to update those repositories and pushing them back to the GitHub. Let us start our discussion with initial steps. To work with Git, first we need to install the Git. We have already seen it in our previous videos. So let us start to configuring Git with the user who is currently working with the current machine. And to configure the Git with username and email ID, we will use the command git config, and we are changing the global setting user.name, and we are specifying the username who is working with this particular machine, and git config minus minus global user.email and the email address of the user. By providing them, we can in future, if any modifications is done by this user, we will see this username and email address in future commits. Let us see how we can execute this. To do this, we need to open Git. To open Git, open Start menu and search for Git Bash and open the Git Bash. And we can execute these commands from anywhere. Currently, I am in C users, current user. I am executing from here, and the command is git. Every git command starts with the word git, and the actual command is config. And we are changing the global setting minus minus global, and the setting we are changing is user dot name, and the name of the current user is kmd bccs. And next we wanted to configure the email also, git config minus minus global user dot email kmd 198806 at the rate of gmail.com. And if you want to check the current user and current user email, we can use the same commands without the username and without the email, that is git config minus minus global user dot name. The current user is kmdbeccsc and his email is kmd198806 at the rate of gmail.com. Now we are ready to create repositories. Basically, repositories are the directories and which will track the changes happened on the files presented in those directories. And if we want to create a repository, first we need to choose the location where we wanted to create that directory. And I wanted to create a repository in the college data, DevOps, CBDS. In this, I am creating a new directory named as repositories. In this directory, I wanted to create a new repository with the name local repo. So to create a local repository here, first we need to change our current working directory from C colon users current user to D drive college data DevOps CBDS repos. So to change drive first, we will use the command cd space d colon, and to change directory in it, we will use the command cd college data slash. In this we have a directory named as DevOps. In this we have a directory CBDS. In this we have a directory repos. And here we wanted to create a new repository. A new repository is a directory in which we can place the files and we can track the changes made on those files. So to create a directory, the command is mkdir, and we wanted to choose the name as local repo. And if we go into this directory, we will see nothing in it. And I have enabled hidden files also. It is not showing anything. That means it is just an empty directory. And if we want to make it as a repository, what we need to do is we need to execute a command inside this directory. To go inside this directory, we will use the command cd space local repo. In it, to make it as a directory, we will use the command git init, and we can optionally specify the directory which we want to make as a repository. In this case, that is dot, that is current working directory, because dot always refers the current working directory. Git init dot. Immediately it will create a directory named as dot git. That is the that makes this directory as repository. And from now onwards, if we place any files in it, it will track those. It will track those files, and it will track each and every change made on those files, and it will maintain versions of the files, versions of the changes we made on those files. If we want to go back to the previous version, we can go back to that version also, as we discussed in our previous class. So let us first let us add few files and let us see what it is doing. To create a new file, we can use multiple options. We can use touch command, we can use VI command, we can use nano editor, we can use cat command, we can use multiple options. For now, I am using touch to create an empty file, and I am changing the name as file1. It will just create an empty file. After creating an empty file, if you want to know what is the status of our repository, we can use the command git status. And it will say various details related to our repository. And the first line is saying we are currently on branch master. As we already discussed, Git supports branches, and by default it will create a master branch, and it is saying we are currently on master branch. So far we haven't made any commits on it, and we have one untracked file, that is file1, and nothing added to commit, but untracked files present. Use git add to track them. Here it is clearly saying to track these files, what we need to do is we need to use the command git add, git space add, and we need to provide the file which we want to track, file1. And if we check the git status once again, now it is saying we are still on same branch master, no commits are done yet, and now it is not saying not showing any untracked files, but now it is saying changes to be committed. That is, there is one file to be commit, that file is file1. And to commit this file, we will use the command git space commit. And if you want to show any message with it, we can use -m option. And here I wanted to add a message to this commit, that is file1 added. Now it is saying on master one commit is happened, that is file1 is added, one file is changed, zero insertions, no lines are inserted in that file, and no lines are deleted from that file. And the mode of the file is 644, that is the default permissions of the file. And here, by seeing this one, we might wonder what these untracked files are, what these tracked files are, and what is committed files. Let us see this image. And when in Git workflow, we will find three directories: working directory, staging area, and local repository. By default, whenever we created a new files or whenever we modified any files presented in the repository, they will be in working directory. They will not be tracked by the Git. And if you want to track them by Git, what we need to do is we need to add them to the staging area. And staging area is also called as index, which will maintain the files which were modified or recently added and added it to this particular area. And if you want to if you want to permanently add those changes to the repository, what we need to do is we need to execute another command named as git commit. Then only they will be permanently stored in local repository. They will be considered as permanent files or unmodified files. And later, if we modify anything in those files, they will come back to the working directory, and we need to do the same thing once again. And we might wonder why we need another intermediary between working directory and local repository, because sometimes we might accidentally add few of the files to the repository, and if we directly add them from working directory to repository, we could not reverse them. That's why they added another intermediary area. In that, we can once again check whether they are eligible to commit permanently into the local repository, or we need to revert them back to the working directory. By checking it, we can take the decision. That's why they added one more uh, intermediary, that is staging area. Now let us see it with another example. Now if we check the git status, it is saying we are on master, nothing to commit, and working tree is clean. Now what I wanted to do is I wanted to update our file1 with some content. To update the file, the command is vi space file1, and here I wanted to insert the one line into it, that is, this is file1 or just file1, and I wanted to save the contents. To save the contents, escape colon wq. Now the file is changed. We can see it also. At file1, it contains one line, that is, this is file1. If we check the git status once again, previously the file1 is committed and it is a permanent in repository. And now if we check it, it will be in working directory, that is untracked files. All the files which are modified or all the files which are currently working with are newly created files. They will be in uh, working directory or present working directory. And now it is clearly saying changes not staged for commit. That is, one file is there. That file is file1, which is not a untracked file. That is not a newly created file, which is a file already presented in the repository and modified by the user. And if you want to commit it, what we can do is first we need to add it to the staging area by using git add, and then we can commit it using git commit. To add it to the staging area or index, we will use the command git add file1. Now if we check warning, there is a warning in the working copy of file1. Basically, we modified it in Windows environment. That's why it is showing this error. And now we can check the status once again. If we check the status, it is saying we are on same master. There is no files in working directory, but there is one file in staging area. That file is file one. If we want to add it to the repository by committing permanently into the repository, what we can do is we can execute the git commit, and optionally we can specify the commit message also by using -m option. And here we are saying file one updated, and now it is saying master branch is committed with the commit id. This is the commit id. File 1, the message is file 1 updated. One file changed, and we inserted one line into this particular file. And to check all the commits performed on this repository so far, we can use the command git log. It will show uh, what are the different commits happened on this particular repository and who made those changes and at what time they made those changes. And it is saying KMD BEC CSE performed the first commit on Wednesday, October 9, 8:59:01 p.m. And the latest commit is also performed by the same user and on the date Wednesday, October 9, 21, that is 9/5/11 p.m. And if we want to add multiple files, we can do that also. Let us see. For example, if we want to add two files, file 2 and file 3, we added both the files. If we check our file system, we could find three files now. And if we check git status, it will say two files are in untracked portion, file 2 and file 3. And if we want to commit them, we need to add them to the staging area first, and then uh, we need to commit those changes. And it is saying there are two untracked files. This time it is saying these are untracked files. These are newly created in the working directory, not modified files. That's why it is saying untracked files. And if we want to add all of them at a time, we can say git add dot or git add minus minus all. We can use any one option, and I am using git add dot. Now if we check git status, it is saying no files are there in working directory. All the files are presented in staging area, and at this time also we can update the file. If we want to update file 2, we can update it file 2, and here I wanted to add this is file 2 colon wq. And if we check git status once again, it is saying two files are there in git staging area, file 2 and file 3, and one file is there in working directory, that is file 2. It is not a untracked file, but it is a modified file. And if you want to add this one also to the staging area, what we need to do is we need to use git add. But now I am not going to add it to the staging area. I wanted to demonstrate one more command, that is git difference. And git difference is used to find the difference between the files presented in uh, working directory and staging area, and it can also be used to find the differences between the same file presented in working directory and repository, or working directory and staging area. Let us see how we can achieve this functionality. And first, to demonstrate this, I would like to depict the current scenario. If we check our current scenario, it is like this. We have three files. File 2, file 3, and staging area and the repository. And in repository, we already have file 1. File 1 is already presented in repository, and file 2 is already presented in file 2 and file 3 are already presented in staging area. File 2, file 3 is already presented in staging area. Repository. And because of the latest change happened on file 2, it is presented in working directory also. File 3 is not presented in working directory, but file 2 is presented in working directory. So now let us see how to find the differences between the same file presented in two different areas using git diff. So let us see it first. The command is git diff. It is used to find the difference between the files presented in working directory and staging area. As we know, currently file 2 is presented in working directory and file 2 and file 3 are presented in staging area. If we execute this command, it tries to bring the differences between file 2 presented in working directory and file 2 presented in staging area, and file 3 presented in working directory and file 3 presented in staging area. Let us see it. And it is clearly saying diff. There is one file in both the areas, that is file 2. This is the file 2 presented in working directory. This is the file 2 presented in staging area. And minus minus specifies the working directory file, and plus specifies the uh, minus specifies staging staging area, and plus specifies working directory. And it is saying one line is additionally presented in staging area, that is this is file 2. And if you want to know the difference between staging area and the repository, if you want to know the difference between these two, we will use the command git diff. Git diff. And if we want to know the difference between these two areas, that is staging area and repository, we will use the command git diff minus minus staged. Diff minus minus staged. We don't have any common files between these two. That's why it is not showing any differences between these two. In staging area, we have file 2, but in repository we don't have any file 2. And if we modify file 1 parallelly, vi space file 1, currently we have the content, this is file 1, and I am writing one more line, line 2, and we saved it. Now if we check the git status, this is in untracked portion, and I would like to add it to the staging. Git add file 1, and now if we execute git diff minus minus staged, now it is saying one file is there between uh, staging area and repository, that is file 1, and the previously also I mentioned it in a reverse order. This is staging area file, and this is repository, that is already committed file, and plus represents staging area file, and minus represents the committed file. And it is clearly saying one line is newly added in staging area file, that is line 2 is added, and there is nothing changed in repository file. And if you want to know the difference between these two areas, the command will be git diff minus minus staged. And if we want to know the difference between working directory and repository, in that case we will use the command git diff head. Head always refers the current commit. In this case it is saying one file, here we executed the command. In the working copy of file 2, it is because of Windows, in Windows environment we modified it, A file 1 and B file 1. In working directory, the staged file is also there in working directory also, so far because it is not yet committed, and file 2 is still presented in working directory, and it is saying one new line is added, that is file 2. And this is what we can discuss about difference. Git difference is used to know the difference between the same file presented in two different sections, that is by using which we can find the difference between the same file presented in working area or staging area, and staging area to repository, and working directory to repository. And if you want to add all of them to the staging area, we can use the command git add minus minus all, also can also be used. Previously we used that, that's why we used minus minus all. If we check git status, all the files must be presented in staging area, and if we want to commit them, git commit minus m is to specify the message, and next one message, and here we are saying file 2 and file 3 are added, and it is saying 3 files are changed, 2 new insertions, because we added content to the file 2, and we added one line to the file 1, that's why it is saying 2 lines are inserted. If we check git diff, it is saying nothing is there, because nothing is there in working directory and staging area. Git diff minus minus stage, in this case also it is not showing anything because nothing is there in staging area, but there are 3 files in repository. And if we execute git diff head. That is the difference between working directory and repository. In this case also it is not showing anything because we don't have anything in our working directory. We have files in our repository. In this way, we can create a repository locally and we can update that repository using by creating files in it, by modifying the files, and later we can perform various operations like adding the newly created files to the staging area and committing those changes to the repository using git commit, and we can see the status of the repository at every step by using the git status command. And I hope you can understand how to create a repository locally and how to update the repository with the help of different commands, and how to commit those changes manually. And if you check all these things, if you want to know whether they are tracked by the Git or not, you can check the commits happened so far on this repository using the command git log. And it is clearly saying in first version one file is added and its commit ID is this one. And in second commit, we updated that file and this is the commit ID. And in third commit, we added two more files. File 2 and file 3 are added, and we added few lines also. That is, this is the commit ID. And let us see what this commit is and how we can use this commit now. And this is what we are talking about. Git log command is used to view the history of commits in a Git repository. It prints commit hash, that is this one, this long hash code, and the author who made these changes and date on which he made these changes. And the latest commit is always on top. There are several options to customize this output. Those options are -n to show most recent n commits, and minus pretty, %h and %s, which will print only the abbreviated hash message, hash code, and commit message of the uh, commit, and minus one line, which shows a summary of the commits with one line per commit, and minus graph, which shows text-based graphical representation. Let us see. And in this case, if we want to see only the most recent two commits, we can use -n2. It will show the most recent two commits only. And if we want to see only formatted message, we can use minus pretty equal to %h. We wanted to print a hash code, and %s, that is the message. Git log minus pretty. Sorry, I added a space between, and it is showing only the hash code, commit hash, and the commit message. And later, if we wanted to see only one line description of each commit, we can use minus one line. It will show only the one line description of each commit. And minus graph will be used to print textual graphical format of hash values. And now let us see what this. And also, if we want to show the details of each commit, we can use show command also. Git show hit the command to see a particular hash, a particular commit details. And if you want to know this particular commit details, you can pass this commit hash value show, and it is saying in this commit, this commit was performed by KMD BECCSC on October 9, 18 p.m. and the commit messages file 2, file 3 are added, and it is saying one line is added to this file, that is line 2 to the file 1, and in previous commit there is no file named as file 2 recently added with one line, that is this is file 2, and that's it. In this commit we performed these changes, and here file 3 is also added without any contents on it. To quit, press Q, and we can also use pointer, that is head. Head is a pointer which always refers the current commit. You can also use head, and we can also use um, pointers related to the head, that is head tilde 1. Generally we read it as head minus 1, which will give us the previous commit details, head minus 2, which will give us the first commit details. In that we added one file without any contents, that's why it is showing like this. And now let us see what exactly this commit is. Basically a commit is a SHA-1 hash code, and this hash is 40 character length and 160 bit length by default, but the first 6 characters are good enough to refer to a particular commit. With this code one can revert back to a specific commit or commit state if we wanted to go back, and it is this commit hash code will be generated based on contents included in that particular commit, which includes metadata such as other timestamp and the commit message, as well as actual changes made in that particular commit. And we already discussed about this one. When a repository is created or cloned locally, the working directory code is on main branch or master branch. In the realm of Git, main or master is the default stable branch where the production ready code resides. Developers work on new features or bug fixes in a separate branches. As we already discussed earlier, these branches can be merged into the stable branch after they have been thoroughly tested. And this is all about how to create a repository locally and how to update it and how to commit the changes. Now let us see how to create a repository in a um, remote machine or GitHub, and how to clone it locally and how to update it. To do that, go to the github.com, and to create a repository, click on create repository and provide a repository name, and I am choosing the name as GitHub repo, and this is a public repository, and I am not adding any readme file, and I am not adding a git ignore file, and I wanted to choose the default license. Create a repository, and whenever you created repository, it will give you the URL to access this repository, and it allows you to create new files here, and it also allows you to upload already existing files in your local machine. And for now I wanted to create one file in it, so to create a new file, click on this link, that is create a new file, and it shows a user interface which allows you to add contents to this file, and I am adding the file contents as file1, and name of the file is also file1. And if you want to commit these changes permanently, you can click on this commit changes button, and here it will show the commit message, and it is saying create file 1. Yes, we wanted to keep this message as it is, and click on commit changes. It will commit these changes. And now if you check on your repository, it will show one file with the name file1, and the URL to access this repository, this is the URL github.com/kmdbacsc/github repo.git. And so far on this we performed one commit, that is 55851b4. And if we wanted to download it to the local machine, we can do that. For that purpose, uh, come to the local machine, and previously we opened it from start menu, and we redirected to a target directory using cd command. Now I wanted to show you the other way to open git bash from that particular directory directly, and we wanted to clone the remote repository into this directory, that is D drive, college data, DevOps, CBDS, repos. In this, we wanted to clone the directory. To clone it, we need to open Git Bash from here. To open Git Bash from here directly, right click in this directory, anywhere in this directory, click on Show More Options, and here you can find the option Open Git Bash here. If you open it from here, it will directly open it from this directory. Now what I wanted to do is I wanted to clone the remote repository into the local machine. To clone it, the command is git clone. Git clone, and we need to pass the URL of the remote repository. And the URL of remote repository can be copied from GitHub repo. Go to the GitHub repo. Under code, we could find this one URL, copy it, and come here, git clone, paste. And it is saying cloning into the local repository, that is GitHub repo. And it is saying enumerating objects 3 done, and receiving objects 3 of 3 done. Let us see what it shows now. And if we check our directory now, earlier we don't have this GitHub repo. Now we have GitHub repo. If we open this, it will show .git directory also, because it will copy the complete repository into the local machine and along with file 1. And if we want to update it, we can update it just like how we updated local repository. That is, if we want to add a new file, vi. And now here let us check git status first. It is saying we are in repository. We can execute all these commands in a repository only. To execute it, first we need to change our directory to repository GitHub repo. In this, I wanted to check the current status of this repo. Sorry, git status. It is saying on branch main, your branch is up to date with the remote repository main. Nothing to commit. Here origin means the remote repository from which we cloned this repository, and main is the branch which we clone. And here we need to remember one more thing. Whenever you created a git repository locally, it will create the repository with default branch master. And if we create a repository in GitHub, it will create a default branch with the name main. And now I wanted to add one more file, that is file2, vi space file2, and in this I wanted to add a line. This is file2. Sorry, to save it wq. And also I wanted to update already existing file, that is file1. To update it, here space file1. I wanted to update it with the contents. This is file1. Save this one also. And now let us check the status now, git status, and it is saying one file is modified, that is file1, and one file is untracked file, that is newly created in this working directory. And if you want to add one of the file to the staging area, what we can do is git add file name. We can specify file1. If we want to add all the files at a time to the staging area, we can use git add that. And now if you want to commit them, git commit, sorry, first check the status. Now it must show all the files are moved to the staging area, nothing is there in working directory, and we can commit these changes to the repository. To make these changes permanent, we can execute the commit git commit, and optionally we can specify the message, and we can say local commit, and it is saying two files are changed, two lines are inserted, one line is deleted, because it assumes that the file 1 is deleted and we added a new line, that is this is file 1, and second file anyway we added a new line, that is new file is added. And if we wanted to delete a file, we can do that also. Now if you check git status, it is saying nothing is there in a working directory, nothing is there in staging area, and everything is up to date. And if we remove one of the file, that is file2, sorry, rm file2, and it removed our file2. If you check the file system, now we have only one file. If we check git status, it will identify that one also. It is saying one file is deleted, file2. And if you want to commit these changes, what you can do is you can use git add minus minus all, yes, and git commit. I'm saying minus m file2 is removed. And if you check git status once again, everything is clean. And if you check git log, it will show three commits. Those three commits are the initial commit made by the GitHub. That's why there also we have given the name as KMD and our email ID is this one. That's why we could not find any difference. But this commit was done by GitHub, and these two commits are done by the local machine by the same user KMD 1988-06, and it is saying the original origin is behind the two commits, but our local repository is ahead of two commits of the remote repository. That is the same thing. It is also saying your branch is ahead of the original GitHub repository origin main by two commits. And if you want to push these changes back to the remote repository, what we can do is we can use the command git push. We need to say where we wanted to push. We wanted to push it to the same repository to which it is connected, and which branch we wanted to push. We wanted to push the main branch. And if you do this, we could find that difference, because in remote repository we have one file. In that file we have the contents file1, and if we push these changes, it will contain the same files, that is file1, but it will contain a different content, that is this is file1. Let us see. We push origin main, And to download it, we don't need to add. We don't need to login into the machine, but to push it, we need to authenticate ourselves so that it can identify that repository is ours and it can push it to that repository. And it allows you to sign in using browser itself. By clicking on it, you can sign in with your browser, and it is saying authorize Git ecosystem as it asks you to provide the password. I am providing the password. You are being redirected to the authorized application. Yes, we have been redirected. Now if you refresh this window, and here also you can see git push is completed, and here also you can check 3 commits are performed. Earlier it is only 1 commit, now we have 3 commits. And if you check file 1 contents, earlier it contained only file 1, now it is showing this is file 1. In this way you can create repositories locally and you can update them. And in the same way you can create repositories in GitHub, and you can clone it to the local machine and update it and then push it back to the remote repository. And you might ask me how to push locally created repository into GitHub. To do that, we need to follow 2 steps. First, create your repository locally and update it with whatever code you want to update, and then create a new repository or choose an existing repository in GitHub. For now, I wanted to create a new repository, local repo, and I wanted to create it also as a public repository. If it is a private, I could not push it into this repository. I am not adding any readme file, git ignore file. I wanted to choose the default license. I am creating a repository. And now what we need to do is we need to link this repository with our local repository. To link it with the local repository, first go to that repository, cd space local repo. To link it, we will use the command git remote add origin. The remote repository linked to this repository is URL of that repository. That's it. Git remote add origin, the link to that repository. It is linked. Now you can execute the same push command, git push origin. Earlier we don't have anything in this repository, that is local repo presented in GitHub. You can see it here. Nothing is there. And if you push it into the locally, our branch is master branch. Git push origin master. And here also, if you check it now, you have the master branch, and in that master branch we have the same files we seen in our local repository. This is all about how to create repositories and how to update them and how to check the status of those repositories and how to push it to the remote repository. And let us see, before concluding this session, let us see a few more details related to it. And whenever you are talking about repositories copied from GitHub into the local machine, we will talk about upstream or remote tracking branches. The main branch in the local repository is set up to track the remote origins main branch. Basically, origin is the name given for the remote repository cloned, and main is the branch and the remote repository. Every local repository is associated with a remote tracking branch. Whenever you cloned it from a remote repository or add it to or execute remote add command, and these are the steps we normally performed while executing while using Git. And here, whenever you created a new file in the working directory, it will be considered as a untracked file. If you modify any of the uh, already existing files are generally called as unmodified files. If you modify any of the file using text editor or any simple modification, it will be considered as modified. And whenever you execute git add, it will be called as staged file. And untracked files can be added to the staged file using git add. Unmodified files can become modified files whenever you edit it using vir, echo, or cat, or any other nano or any other tool. And they can become staged files whenever you execute git add. Whenever you execute git commit, they will be permanent and they will become unmodified files. And if you want to remove them, untracked files, you can remove them from repository. And once you executed a commit, it will be permanently stored. And in Git workflow, if you wanted to know various details related to the remote, you can use Git remote. Git remote V is used to get the name of the remote repository and its URL. And if you wanted to know the branch, you can use the command git branch, outputs the current branch. Git branch minus VV will output the local branches and the corresponding remote tracking branches. And a file after commit becomes an unmodified file, indicating that the versions of the file in the staging area in the repository are same. If any changes made on the staged file, it becomes modified. Such file needs to be staged and committed to move it to the local repository. And we have already seen all these things. And the same thing we could find here also. And untracked files can be added to the index area by using git add. By using git commit, we can make it as permanent, and we can commit it into the local repository. And if you want to clone a repository from remote machine, we can use git clone. Git fetch and git pull we will see in our next videos. That's all for today's video. Thank you.